Justin Trudeau lying about refugees? Say it ain't so. I'm Brian Lilly with the Rebel.media. We've caught Trudeau and his Liberals lying again. This time it's the claim by him, his cabinet ministers, and even bureaucrats, the nonpartisan civil service, that they couldn't help religious minority groups fleeing ISIS. You know, the ones like the Christians, the Yazidis, the Alawite or Shia Muslims deemed infidels by ISIS. All during the refugee rush in late 2015, early 2016, I was asking officials and then Immigration Minister John McCallum why they claimed they were trying to help the most vulnerable people, but they weren't giving priority treatment to religious and ethnic minorities as part of their plan to bring in 25,000 refugees. I asked McCallum about that directly. On December 16, 2015, here's what he said.
Well, we, like the United Nations, target the most vulnerable, and we do not ask the individuals what religion they are.
I pressed McCallum at the time as to why LGBT refugees were given priority, but religious persecution religious groups were not. He couldn't answer. He babbled on about how some Muslims were persecuted. We all knew that. That's why I'd asked him about minority groups, including minority Muslim sects. You know, I always just got the feeling they simply didn't want to be seen helping Christians in the Middle East in what many call Muslim lands. McCallum's right-hand man throughout this time was a high-level bureaucrat named Daniel Manicum. He told me that on the intake forms there was nowhere to put down religion. We asked to see those forms. We were told they didn't exist. Since then, and many access to information requests, we've been told that the questionnaires for refugees don't exist, then that they do exist but couldn't be released due to national security, and most recently they went back to claiming they didn't exist. Well, now thanks to immigration lawyer Richard Kurland, we have access to documents that show that prior to Trudeau and company being sworn in, the Harper government, and this includes the bureaucrats, were keeping an eye on religious minorities and giving them priority because of their persecution, because they were vulnerable. Kurland obtained a secret memo through access to information that details the priority areas for Canada's Iraqi refugee program in mid to late 2014. These are people, just like the Syrians, fleeing from ISIS. Now, the Liberals opposed this sort of thing during the 2015 election campaign. They and their media allies claimed that Harper and company only cared about helping Christians. That wasn't the case, as you'll see from the priority list set out in Annex A. Annex A of this document details the then government's priorities and lines them up with UN categories. First category, persons who have been victims of severe trauma, including sexual and gender-based violence, detention, abduction, or torture by state or non-state entities in country of origin. The UN Resettlement Handbook puts that in the category of survivors of violence and torture. The next category is where religion comes in. Members of minority groups and or individuals which have been targeted in country of origin owing to their religious ethnic background. The UN puts that down as legal and physical protection / women at risk. No mention of just helping Christians, despite what the Liberals and their media allies said. They speak of helping religious and ethnic minorities. So yes, that would help Iraqi Christians, just as it would have helped Syrian Christians, but it would also include Yazidis and minority Muslim groups targeted by ISIS and other Islamists that see these minorities as groups and people to be exterminated. There are 9 other categories given priority, but in the election campaign, you only heard that Stephen Harper wanted to help persecuted Christians, as if that were a bad thing. No mention of women at risk of violence, including honor killings. No mention of stranded elderly refugees being given priority treatment or children who'd been separated from their parents. No mention of priority status being given to people with disabilities who needed treatment but couldn't get it at home. I have to say, this is an entirely compassionate priority list, but all you heard was Harper and the conservatives, those born-again Bible thumpers, wanted to help the Christians. Stories that always hinted that the conservatives just hated Muslims and anyone not quite like them. Trudeau and his gang, they took over, and suddenly that priority list is now out the window. Now Canada can settle LGBT refugees, but not Christians, because it's wrong to ask someone how they worship, but not how they have sex. The officials said they couldn't have tracked it if they tried. Well, these documents show they can, and they did. Check out this statement from the memo prepared for then Immigration Minister Chris Alexander by the bureaucrats. It states quite clearly they knew where these minority groups were. While at present it's interesting to note that there is now a higher proportion of Iraqi Christians in Jordan than in Syria, this is counterintuitive in terms of the relative size of local Christian communities. The difference may be explained by higher resettlement numbers out of Syria, which were weighed in favor of minorities. They knew where the Christians and other religious minorities were. They could and did track them. They gave them priority. So what changed? It wasn't forms, it wasn't capabilities, it was will. It was political posturing. Justin Trudeau had said during the campaign he would not give priority to religious and ethnic minorities who, by definition, were the most vulnerable people, the most vulnerable refugees. In the campaign, he was asked directly whether he would prioritize these groups, and he said no.
A Liberal government would prioritize ethnic and religious minorities.
Absolutely not.
There you have it. The order came from the top, and so we brought in nearly 40,000 Sunni Muslims and just a few dozen Yazidis. I'm not saying the Sunni Muslims aren't real refugees fleeing real persecution and war. I'm saying that they wouldn't have been killed for who they are, like the Christians were, or turned into sex slaves like the Yazidi women were. I dismissed the idea when it first came out that Justin Trudeau acted the way he did because he just wanted to import votes. But the more evidence I see of their lies, their manipulations, the more I think that might be the case. Trudeau wants to claim that Canada under his leadership is a compassionate country, but given the chance to help the most vulnerable, his orders were to leave those people where they were, let them rot, because Trudeau had other priorities. Shame on him. If you like the Rebel video you just watched, make sure you click here to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you already subscribed to the main channel, subscribe to YouTube Canada for all the Trudeau news the other guys don't see fit to print.